G'day there, you beautiful people. It's Connor here again, and we're back with some more stories from Reddit. As always, if you enjoy these videos, be sure to hit like and subscribe, and also the notification bell so you never miss an episode. Alrighty, let's get right into it. Okay, we are on Am I the A-Hole? This one was written by user PracticalBuy3266, and it's titled, Am I the A-Hole for telling my daughter her much older boyfriend isn't welcome in our home? My, female 48, husband 46, and I have a 20-year-old daughter, Ellie, who is currently on vacation from college. About 5 months or so ago, Ellie told us that she had a new boyfriend, who I'll call Tom. This came rather out of the blue, as Ellie hadn't mentioned seeing anyone or that she was dating, but both my husband and I were supportive and happy for her. However, Ellie was strangely secretive about the whole situation. Usually she's an open book, especially with me, and would always share details of her personal life. On this occasion, she wouldn't show any pictures, and we knew next to no information about Tom, other than that they met at a party through a mutual friend. Ellie spent the past month of her vacation in her college town, and the plan was always for her to come back this weekend. Ellie asked if she could bring Tom with her for a few days of the trip as they were getting serious, and she wanted him to meet us. Although we mentioned that we knew barely anything about him, Ellie expressed that it would be a surprise and that we'd love him. Given he's clearly an important part of our daughter's life, we agreed and said we'd look forward to spending the weekend together. Yesterday morning, we went to pick up Ellie and Tom from the airport to drive them to our place, and we were shocked. We knew instantly that Tom was much older than Ellie, and he certainly wasn't a college student. I was just in a state of surprise but didn't want to cause a scene, and told my husband to do the same. We drove home, but it was a frosty journey, which Ellie commented on. When we arrived, my husband point-blank asked Tom how old he was. Tom said he was 44. I was immediately disgusted. He's only 2 years younger than my husband and old enough to be Ellie's father. My husband continued to interrogate him, asking how they met and the whole background. Ellie explained that it was at a party and Tom was there because he's well known around the town, and they realized that they had a lot in common and hit it off from there. I really didn't want to hear any more, and my husband told Tom to leave. Ellie shouted and said how unfair this was, and we hadn't even given Tom a chance, and that he made her happy. Tom could sense the tension, so left, and Ellie followed behind him. I texted Ellie to tell her we'd love to see her and to come over to discuss the situation. She asked if Tom was welcome, and I said he wasn't. Therefore, after labeling me a judgmental a-hole, she told me she wasn't coming and that they would be staying at a local hotel and catching up with friends. I feel terrible about the whole situation and don't want to lose my daughter over it. My husband isn't budging and says he'd have to be held back if he ever saw that man again. Am I the a-hole for saying he isn't welcome, or have I done the right thing? Sheesh, yeah, I mean, just because it's legally okay doesn't mean it's right. I have a feeling if I was a father, I'd be feeling the same way Dad is right now. Let's go to the comments. I had similar, and my foster dad was what I believed amazingly chill about me dating a guy in his mid-30s when I was 19. I spoke to him over a decade later, and he said he wanted to deck the guy, but knew if he pushed me then I'd dig my heels in, and the relationship would go on far longer. Instead, he asked me to check in so he knew where I was and when I'd be back to make sure I was safe. He did, however, do other things to gently highlight the inequality of the relationship. For example, he'd make sure to say how nice I looked every time I left the house. My boyfriend would send me back to the house for not wearing makeup or the right clothes. It didn't take too long for me to put two and two together and realize the boyfriend was a control freak who wanted a trophy girlfriend. Not the a-hole. He was at a college party because he's well known around town. That means he's well known for preying on younger women and probably also for buying alcohol for underage college students. Play the long game here. Best story I've heard. The dad befriended the guy. They talked about stuff relevant to their age group, did dad-aged stuff together, talked about things like insurance and retirement and house payments, went out to eat at boring grown-up places instead of sports bars, and just generally acted like middle-aged men. She realized she was basically dating her father. They had almost nothing in common, and broke up. Not the a-hole. Former cop, advocate. I would suggest you don't give her a reason to distance herself further from you and your husband, because Tom needs to stop your support and brainwash her to think you're against her, and you're not. I encourage you to not exclude him. You can get together somewhere public so he's not in your home, but you aren't letting him keep your daughter away while you navigate this precarious situation. All the best. Man, I gotta say, it would take a stronger man than I to befriend a 44-year-old man who's dating my 20-year-old daughter. Jeez. Okay, on to an update. First off, I wanted to thank everyone for their comments and messages yesterday. I was overwhelmed with the responses and didn't expect my post to gain so much attention. I know opinions were quite split, but I appreciate everyone for being honest. Please accept my apologies for not responding to anyone, but there has been a lot on my mind, so I thought it would be best to provide an update for those interested. For those who haven't read the whole post, a brief summary is my 20-year-old daughter, Ellie, brought home her boyfriend of 5 months, Tom, to our house. Tom happens to be 44, and my husband and I told Tom that he wasn't welcome in our home. Ellie and Tom are currently staying in a nearby hotel. I was incredibly down throughout most of Sunday, so I spoke to my husband and said that I really wanted to see Ellie. However, I knew that wouldn't be possible without also seeing Tom, so I mentioned to my husband about meeting Ellie and Tom at a neutral location for brunch today. I asked my husband if he wanted to join, but he said he didn't feel in the right frame of mind at this stage, so we agreed that I would go alone. I was anxious throughout the drive, but when I met Ellie, those nerves subsided relatively quickly. I was generally just happy to see her and that she was well. I still felt a bit uncomfortable around Tom, but I thought this was the opportunity to find out more about him and his intentions, as it were. We sat down and I tried to find out as much information about Tom as possible. When I asked him to elaborate on being known around a college town and being at the same party as Ellie, Tom said he used to go to the same college when he was Ellie's age, loved the place and decided to never leave. Throughout his time, he still frequented the main bars and places that college students do, which meant he remained in the community in some form. I found it quite an unsettling response, but remained polite. In terms of other details I learned, Tom has never been married, nor does he have any children. He works as a software engineer and enjoys cooking and meditation in his spare time. Something felt off about him, but maybe I already had my preconceptions. Ellie spoke more about what a good match they were and how much in common they had. When I asked her to elaborate, she spoke about how they both loved the same spots around town and campus, with apparently the same love of sushi, and she's never met someone so mature and understanding. Tom also said that Ellie was perfect for him and he was serious. I probed if he'd had many other relationships with younger women. Ellie didn't enjoy this question, but Tom said that he generally didn't do relationships, yet something about Ellie had drawn him in. Eventually, after about 2 hours, we ended the brunch. Ellie said how nice it had been and she was so happy I'd shown an interest in Tom, before asking whether they could both come to dinner some evening. I told her that would be nice, but I'd have to speak to her dad. Tom shook my hand, and that was that. My husband remains reluctant, but I feel it's the right thing to do if we want to maintain a relationship with Ellie. I didn't like Tom off first impressions, and this hasn't done much to convince me. Something is just off there, and some of his answers solidified my thoughts about him not being right for Ellie. I suppose I'll have to remain open-minded, but appreciate any thoughts. One comment says, "Please make sure she's on reliable birth control." It would be best to get some background checks done on this man. There could be a lot of lies involved. He sounds sketchy enough already. Wonder if Opie could call the college and ask if he's known there. Maybe get a gauge on him if he is. I appreciate how hard you both protect your daughter, but at the end of the day, she is an adult and she can't make her own mistakes if she feels pressure from you guys to make decisions. The thing is, if she keeps pushing away because you guys are reluctant to let her be an adult all on her own, she won't come to you when she needs help either. If this guy ends up being a bad guy and she needs someone to be there for her, why would she come to you if she feels as though she's just going to be shamed? I would say an entirely different spiel if she was, say, 16 or 17, but she's an adult in college learning her way around this world, and she's going to need support in controlling her own life without you directly deciding what she can and can't do. You said she was secretive about it from the jump, and that tells me she knew your reaction. It's time to show her you can be a supportive friend when she needs you, instead of an unsupportive parent. This was a good first step. Okay, on to another update. First off, apologies to everyone for not updating sooner and my lack of replies. I post and read everyone's replies and messages, but it's so overwhelming that I struggle to know who to respond to. However, a lot has happened in the past week, and enough people asked for an update, so I thought I'd provide one. For context, for those who haven't read the original post and first update, my 20-year-old daughter Ellie brought home her boyfriend Tom from college for the first time. He turned out to be 44, and it's been a huge shock to my husband and I. I met him without my husband and my daughter for brunch without feeling entirely comfortable about the situation, but my biggest priority is not losing my daughter. After I came home from brunch, I spoke to my husband about the possibility of Tom and Ellie joining us for dinner one evening. My husband was completely against it, but I told him that if we still wanted to exercise some degree of control over the situation before we pushed Ellie away entirely, this was something we had to agree to. It took a lot of convincing, but my husband agreed, and we invited Tom and Ellie to come round the Saturday just gone. Before then, I ended up talking to my oldest daughter and Ellie's sister, Holly, 23, about the situation. Holly was shocked and Ellie had told her nothing. Holly decided to do some social media digging, but struggled because Tom didn't have much of an online presence. She said she was coming to dinner on Saturday. Although I was reluctant because it seems like it would spiral, I eventually said yes. So we get to the dinner on Saturday, and Holly just continually grills Tom. It was far, far worse than I did. She asked him if younger girls were his type, why someone his age is still hanging around at college parties, and other small remarks. Ellie told her multiple times to leave her alone, and I tried to act as a mediator. My husband was just silently seething, and I could tell how uncomfortable he felt in Tom's presence. Eventually, Tom and Ellie said they had some big news to share. Ellie announced that she and Tom were planning to move in together for the upcoming college year. I almost spat my drink out. Ellie had planned to live with other friends, and when I questioned this, Tom answered that, quote, he realized that he probably won't have another long-term relationship. Ellie makes him so happy, and he doesn't want to waste any time with who I want to be my wife and the future mother of my children. At this point, my husband lost it and told Tom to get out of his house. Tom stood up and seemed affronted, and Ellie started crying. I couldn't remember the last time my husband had shouted like that, and I think it surprised Ellie. Holly said it was deserved and said she needed to get away from the pedo freak. It all ended up with Ellie leaving in tears with Tom, my husband going upstairs, and I was just inconsolable. I've reached out to Ellie since, but she hasn't responded. I don't want her to move in with Tom, and it seems like he's trying to derail her whole life. She's 20 and does not need to be married and have kids, especially with someone his age. She's never had a relationship before though, and she appears infatuated to the extent she's not going to listen. My husband has told me that if Ellie marries Tom, that is it, and he wouldn't want a relationship with her going forwards. I can't agree with that and will always love Ellie, but it doesn't mean that the whole situation hasn't made me incredibly sad. I would appreciate any advice. Geez, it seems to be going from bad to worse. Okay, now for another update, 1 year later. So much has happened since then that has been so overwhelming that it's caused me to completely forget about this. However, I stumbled upon this Reddit account earlier today, and due to the amount of messages I received, I feel compelled to share an update. For those who don't want to read the whole post, the long and the short of it is Ellie is engaged and pregnant. The engagement happened around January, after only around a year of dating, and the pregnancy was announced in March. Ellie is keeping the baby and is due late this year. I'm still heartbroken and struggling to come to terms with the whole affair. Ellie was so bright, cheery, and with an active social life. Now she lives with Tom in her college town, despite having dropped out of college herself due to the pregnancy, with barely any friends due to most of them distancing themselves from her because of Tom. My husband is also low contact with Ellie and wants nothing to do with Tom, while my daughter Holly also feels the same way and wants nothing to do with Ellie or her baby for as long as she remains with the predator. I still keep in contact with Ellie as much as I can, not only because I love her, but also as I know that if things crumble, she'll have no one to turn to. She's ostracized herself, which makes me incredibly sad, and I never thought things would turn out this way. There was a glimmer of hope around March time, where Ellie called me on the phone in tears after discovering that Tom had cheated on her, unsurprisingly, with another college student and an even younger one than Ellie. Although I did try and talk some sense into her and figured this would be a wake-up call, she decided to stay with him after a combination of love bombing and finding out she was pregnant. The wedding has been set for next summer, so the baby can be focused on now. My husband and other daughter have already decided they won't go, and many others on my side of the family are uncomfortable with the idea. I'm trying to stay strong and hope I'll love my grandchild, but this isn't something that will ever get easier. If there are any other groundbreaking updates, I will try to share. If not, I appreciate everyone's support and advice. It really meant more than you know. Definitely not the update we wanted. Let's read some final comments. Ellie did not even break up with him after he cheated on her. I have a feeling that he'll be an absent father and eventually leave her. Life lessons can be really tough. He definitely doesn't want to raise a kid, just makes it easier to chain her to him. Ellie will be doing all the work while Tom goes out to college parties. I remember the first post and thinking that this was an awful situation. All Opie can do is continue to keep the doors open to her daughter and the love flowing. She doesn't have to have a relationship with her future son-in-law, gag, to achieve that. I really hope that her daughter comes around and sees that she's being used. Poor thing. Manipulators almost always cut people off from their support mechanisms. I think you just have to accept that your child has a 50% chance of being a frickin' moron who will actively screw up their life as an adult, and as a result, take a step back emotionally once they become adults. Your influence is pretty limited once they've left the nest, so the best option is to become a bit more aloof towards the whole situation. Oof, that is just sad. Nothing about Opie's daughter's life at this point is going to end well, unless she finally gets into her senses that she's trapped with an abuser. Sad and foolish. Geez, I remember reading these posts from last year, and pretty much knew at that point Ellie's life was ruined. She was too defensive, too, I know better. She's tethered to him forever now. Even if she ever gets away from him, they share a kid together for the rest of her life. She's already miserable and isolated, and he whittled her down enough that she stayed through cheating. He's going to repeatedly cheat with more college kids, while she pops out babies in absolute depression. He may even become verbally and physically abusive now that she's really trapped. But she's blown up her whole life, her education, future, and every relationship. She's going to do everything to try and make it work, especially because she now has a kid. She's not going to leave him. Her only hope now is when she ages out to him and he divorces her for another 20-year-old, she'll be destitute, have no ability to get a job, and will be friendless, but she'll at least be free of him when he leaves her. If she really lucks out, maybe he'll find her being heavily pregnant and then a tired, stressed new mum so annoying and not youthful and fun enough that he'll leave her earlier, instead of years down the line. Geez, it's a pretty grim hypothetical, but hard to disagree. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. Otherwise, leaving that one there and moving on. Okay, moving over to Petty Revenge for a quick one. This one was written by user Octo23, and it's titled Thin Walls and a Frequency Generator. A number of years ago, I lived in Montreal in a rather thin-walled apartment. My neighbour's kitchen was against my bedroom, and at some point, the absolute delight of a human being started turning her radio on shortly before 6 a.m. I tried to talk to her and asked for her to simply move it away from the shared wall or not use it. No change. I sent a registered letter to the landlord asking for some action to be taken, but again, nothing changed. At the time, I was studying electrical engineering and learning about how radios worked. Internally to the radio, whatever frequency you're listening to gets converted to what is known as an intermediate frequency, and then the rest of the circuitry amplifies and filters this one frequency. I had underused frequency generators at work, so I asked if I could borrow one for a bit. I got a few strange looks and questions, but ultimately got permission to borrow one for a few weeks. I set it up in my bedroom, did the basic settings for an unmodulated frequency matching the intermediate frequency for the neighbour's radio, jammed a rudimentary antenna in the back, and went to bed. When I was woken by the neighbour's radio, instead of just jamming in earplugs and trying to go back to sleep, I jumped up and switched on the frequency generator. Suddenly, silence from the neighbour's radio. I then modulated my signal with a 1 kHz tone that was extremely annoying, but my earplugs filtered it out. Knowing that this could interfere with others and also be illegal, I tested it against my own radio, which was about 5 meters away, and it wasn't impacted. Was it better shielding against my attack, or was it the distance? I didn't care. The neighbour stopped using her radio in her kitchen, and I returned the frequency generator after a couple of weeks. That's great, living up to the subreddit's name, that's for sure. One comment says, illegal? Definitely, but sticking your radio on loud at 6 a.m? You get no sympathy. OP says, I wouldn't say it was loud, but it was a talk show, and it was just loud enough that I could hear the voices, and my subconscious was trying to make sense of it, and I couldn't get back to sleep. Had a friend in college, and they set up their own pirate radio station back in the late 70s. They gave it up when they noticed panel trucks with antennas roaming their neighborhood. They were about a quarter mile from each other. It was like a scene out of a movie. F around and find out. That's crazy. Was the government looking for their radio frequencies or something? Very interesting. Anyway, guys, we're going to leave that there. That's it from me today. Hope you enjoyed those stories. Thanks for making it to the end, and I'll see you all in the next video. Have a good day. Cheers.